you probably will know who Esther is after we get talk about the story a little bit. Esther, in Hebrew, her name actually means star, which is kind of cool. That's actually the name that's definitely one of the names Samantha. Just put that out there. I know, right? But she lived about 470 BC. She lived in about 470 BC, so really, really long time ago. And you read about Esther. Guess where you can read about Esther at? In the book of Esther. Good job, man. You're smart. Can anybody tell me the most interesting thing, at least I think one of the most interesting things about the book of Esther is? Anybody have a guess?
Esther.
I guarantee you, it's something, if you don't know, you probably never will guess. The book of Esther, you want to tell everybody you're about to jump out of the chair over there?
It's my favorite book.
It's your favorite book.
The book of Esther never mentions the name of God.
The book of Esther is the only Bible, or only book in the Bible that God's name is never mentioned. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that weird? It's in the Bible. Shouldn't God's name be mentioned? Shouldn't they talk about God, right? Well, we'll get to this a little bit, but you can see, if you really look at the story of Esther, you can see how God was working in the background through the whole thing. So, even though his name wasn't specifically mentioned, Esther was being, God was working in the background of Esther the whole time. Now, Esther was adopted by Mordecai, her older cousin. So, she was adopted by her cousin, and they were both Jews from the tribe of Benjamin. They were living under the rule of King Xerxes. Now, but over the 127 province of India, so one day, King Xerxes' wife made King Xerxes mad, kind of hacked him off a little bit, and so he banishes her from the kingdom, and after a series of times, he decides he's going to find himself a new queen. Now, this story right here, really, you ladies should really read this story. This is all about woman power and women taking charge, because it starts off with this guy kicking his wife out because she did something he didn't like, and then he decides he's going to get a new queen. So he gathers up a bunch of young, beautiful women and gives them beauty treatments, spends months and months giving them different beauty treatments to make them look prettier and nicer and to kind of fit the part and all of this stuff. Esther was one of the ones chosen by the king. And Mordecai told Esther not to tell everyone that she was a Jew. This is one of the things that's going to play in really big. We kind of look over that, like, Mordecai, don't tell me he's a Jew. People what does that really matter? Probably just kind of gloss over that. But you'll see here in a little bit, that was a big thing. That was a good thing that he told her not to say anything. So she listened to Mordecai, and when it was Esther's time to go before the king, everyone absolutely loved her. The king fell in love with her immediately, thought she was the most beautiful in the land, and made her his queen. Story, the end. Everybody lives happily ever after, right?
Yeah.
Woo! Isn't that just a perfect story for ladies? Like one day meet a king and he makes you his queen. And, no. Well, huh? Not a fairy tale. Well, and we're going to find out here, Esther's not in a fairy tale either. So there's this guy that years later, there's this guy that the king promotes to the number 2 spot, and he's got this kind of big attitude, walking around like he's all hot stuff. And he and Mordecai, remember Mordecai, Esther's cousin, wasn't too fond of him, made him mad, wouldn't bow down to him and worship him. So he went and convinced. So this guy went and convinced the king that he needed to kill all the Jews. Kill all these Jews on this certain day. We're going to get rid of them all. And the king's like, hey, that sounds like a bad idea. Let's do that. Well, Mordecai found out about it, and obviously kind of freaked out, right? Like, that would be kind of scary if someone said, you know, you're gonna kill not just you, but everybody you know as part of your tribe and family and everybody. That would be kind of messed up. And so Mordecai Mordecai told Esther what was going on and what was happening, and asked her to go talk to the king. Said, please go talk to the king and see if you can't get him to change his mind and keep this from happening. She told him, first of all, she's like, I'm not too sure about this, because you know, back then you couldn't just go walk up to the king and talk to him whenever you wanted to. Even the queen couldn't just go talk to the king whenever she wanted to. He had to actually call on her and allow her to be in his presence. All right? The king would, you know, and so it was a thing. She could have been killed for going before the king, but she asked Mordecai and people to pray for her, and she decided that she was going to go speak to the king. She goes to the king, throws him a banquet, and you know, a couple different times. Finally talks to the king and says, "Hey, I'm a Jew. You're going to kill everybody, all the Jews. Maybe you ought to stop doing this." You know, my translation. And the king decides he's not going to kill all of them, and that's Esther's story. Now you keep reading in the book of Esther, and you see how the guy who wanted to kill the Jews ended up getting killed himself, and Mordecai got lifted up into second place. God was working through all of that to make sure the Jews were safe, and so. It's a really interesting story. So I encourage you to go back and read the book of Esther. It's not a very long book. It won't take you a whole long time to read, but it's a really interesting story. There's a lot of things that we can learn about from Esther and her life. And we're just going to talk about 4 of them. But just like with the last couple, we could spend months just talking about Esther and her life. One of the biggest thing that we can learn is that God has a plan for us. God's got plans for your life. He puts you in places for a purpose and a plan. Our past they don't dictate our future. God has a purpose for you that may look different than your past did. Where, you know, the people, the family you grew up in, the area you came in may look like you'll never be able to become anything. But God has a purpose for you, and if God's purpose for you is to rise above that, it can happen if you put your trust in Him. Esther never thought she would ever be a queen. She didn't grow up in you know, with hopes and dreams, because that just didn't happen to Jewish girls in that time. And God manipulated things and put her in that position because He had a purpose for her. Esther didn't come from much. But God had a purpose for her life. Esther was an orphan, living in a strange country, and probably didn't ever dream that one day she would be the queen. Probably never even thought it would happen. Whenever she was pulled into the beauty pageant, basically, she probably thought, well, I'm not going to win anyway. You know, it was never really in her mind that was going to happen. No matter where we come from, no matter what life you have now, when we live, no matter what you do, no matter what mistakes you've made, no matter what people the family dynamics you are in, whenever we trust God in the process and understand that God has a purpose for our lives, He can bring us out of that. He can bring us out of that, of all of the past. That He can do more than what you thought could happen. He has a purpose for you, and He has hope for your future. Esther was placed in a royal position. She didn't know why. She didn't know that one day that she would have the opportunity to save all of her people. But being the queen, she was not made queen by chance. It was not by this random thing that happened. It was a purposeful thing that God worked out in the background and moved her into that place. In Esther 4, whenever Mordecai is speaking with her, chapter 4, verse 14, he says, "Who knows? Perhaps you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." Who knows? Maybe you have been put here for this purpose. Mordecai knew that God had a purpose for Esther's life. God has a purpose for your life. And he has you where you are right now to grow you and shape you so that you can fulfill that purpose. Your past doesn't dictate your future. God dictates your future. God already has it planned out and written, and He knows where you're going to end up if you trust Him in that process. In Proverbs it says, we can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. Has anybody ever made plans and then they fell through and it didn't work out? Yeah. Has anybody ever made plans and they didn't work out and then something better came along? We tend to make plans in our lives, but God determines where we go. Just because you don't know your purpose now, that doesn't mean you don't have one. You're still young. Esther was an adult before she became queen. And before she saved the Jewish nation. God didn't make a mistake in you or with you, putting you where you are. He has placed you where you are for a purpose. That purpose may now just be to grow, to mature, until the time comes for you to act. Like Esther was placed in her position until the time was to come for her to act. Use that time to build rapport with people. Use that time to grow good character. You know, whenever Esther walked in front before the king, unannounced, if she was known for being a jerk, if she was known for being naggy and a Karen, if you will, if that was her reputation, the king would have been like, "Who do you think you are?" And he would have had her drug out. But she had good qualities. She had good character. The king and her had a good relationship. So whenever she went before the king, he wanted to hear what she had to say. Because they had a relationship. She had good character. She had good relationships. She was known for being good. Take this time to grow that character, to grow who you are as a person, so that whenever the time comes, you can fulfill the purpose God has for you. The second thing is you're going to hear this a lot through this series, probably, because it's probably one of the biggest things, most important things out there, besides accepting Christ as your Lord and Savior, is get out of your comfort zone. Get out of your comfort zone. We talk about this a lot because guess what? God doesn't like comfort zones. God doesn't like comfort zones. Yes, He loves you and He wants you to have a great life, but He wants you to be uncomfortable for Him. He wants you constantly going out there, putting yourself out for Him and pursuing Him. You can't pursue Him if you're sitting on the couch being comfortable, can you? Esther knew she needed to approach the king in order to save the Jews. But it wasn't going to be easy. It was against the law to approach the king, and Esther could have been killed for approaching him without permission. They didn't even have to ask her a question. It was uncomfortable. And Esther was very comfortable. She was very comfortable, like nobody knew she was a Jew. None of the king didn't know she was a Jew. She wouldn't have been killed unless somebody ratted her out. She had to get out of that comfort zone. In Esther 4:16 it says, "Go gather together all of the Jews of Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days and nights. 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do the same. And then, though it is against the law, I will go in and see the king. If I must die, I must die." Getting out of your comfort zone is scary sometimes. That's why Esther asked for prayer. Sometimes God's will for our lives, His purpose for our lives makes a lot of sense. You're like, yeah, I got that. Sometimes it doesn't make any sense. Sometimes it's scary. Sometimes it's hard. And the best thing to do whenever you're faced with getting out of your comfort zone is to pray and ask God for strength, to pray and ask God for guidance and wisdom, and to get everybody else you know to pray with you and to pray for you. Because prayer will connect you with God and help you see, and will give you the courage to take that step. Getting out of your comfort zone isn't easy. When Esther was faced with an uncomfortable situation, she prayed and asked other people to pray for her. When we're faced with challenges in our lives, we need to go before God in prayer and ask Him to help us get out of that comfort zone, to help us get uncomfortable in our lives, so that in order for us to reach our purpose that God has given us. You know, just like in any sport, whenever you're practicing a sport, you don't practice up to the point where right before you start to feel pain, right? Like, oh, I'm starting to get a little winded, I better stop before I get uncomfortable. You don't do that, do you? If you want to succeed, you push yourself to the point of being uncomfortable, don't you? It's time to get out of our comfort zone for God. He has a purpose for your life, and He wants you to reach that. But in order to reach that, you got to get out of the norm. You got to get out of your social comfort area. The third thing is our strength doesn't come from us. Our strength, it doesn't come from us. When Esther was reminded that she may have been made queen for such a time as this, she drew on that strength to save the Jews. But that strength wasn't her own strength. Her strength came from God. She fasted and prayed. She had other people fast and pray. She drew on spiritual strength from God to approach the king in the nation. In Philippians 4, verses 6 and 7, it says, "Do not worry about anything, but in everything, through prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and mind in Christ." When we feel weak, when we feel scared, when we feel like we can't take another step, when life's struggles seem to overwhelm us, and you feel like you can't do it anymore, God will give you that strength if you trust Him. If you trust Him. That doesn't mean you're going to sit on that step and say, "God, I trust you, but I'm staying up here because this is where I'm comfortable." No, it's saying, God, I trust you," and then you take the jump. We have to let go of what we're comfortable with and trust God to catch us in that. Trust God to give us strength, to build us up. For Esther, that strength allowed her to save thousands of people. For you, that strength could be getting the courage to go speak to somebody who may be hurting. Maybe the courage to go invite someone to sit at your table. Maybe a courage to lead prayer in small groups, or lead a devotion in your friends group. That strength can give you, and that strength maybe that strength will be to stand up for something you believe in, to stand up for what is right. Philippians 2:3 says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or conduct, but in humility consider others as more important than ourselves. You will never..." Oh, I totally skipped ahead. That is not. I'm like, this doesn't have anything to do with what I'm talking about. I skipped ahead to 4. When you feel weak, when you feel like you can't take another step, trust God in that. Number 4 says we can make an impact that's going to last for years. Whenever we trust God, our impact will last for years. When Esther stepped up and spoke to the king to save the Jewish people, she couldn't have known what was going to happen. But if she wouldn't have done that, that one action impacted the lives of people for generations. You imagine, if all of those Jews would have been dead, how many generations of people would have ceased to exist? If you are willing to step out in faith, to get out of that comfort zone, to trust God for strength, you can make an impact that will change the world forever. You. In Philippians says, do not do anything out of selfish ambition or conduct, but in humility consider everything as more impactful than yourselves. But you will never know the impact you have on people. You may never know the type of impact you have on people whenever you put your selfish ideals aside and you step out in faith to try and serve or love on somebody else. The impact you will have will last for years. In Matthew 7, verse 17 through 20, it says, in the same way, every good tree produces good fruit, but every bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, neither can a bad tree produce good fruit. Every tree that doesn't produce good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So, you will recognize them by their fruit. Now, we're the trees in this story. And the fruit is how we treat people and how we and the type of love that we give to people. If we're producing good fruit, that means we are sharing Jesus with people. That means we are praying with people. That means we are encouraging people. That means we're living out the purpose. We're getting out of our comfort zone and living a purpose life for God. If we're producing bad fruit, that means we're being selfish. We're being jealous. We're being angry. We're putting other people down instead of building them up. The question I want to leave you with is, what kind of fruit are you bearing? What kind of fruit are you bearing? Esther had an opportunity to mind her own business or to go change the world. Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? You have that opportunity right now every day, and you don't even realize it sometimes. Smiling at somebody, talking to somebody, encouraging somebody whenever they're down. Those are things that will change the world forever. It will change somebody's world forever. Produce good fruit. Be the type of person that people want to come and talk to. Be the type of person that encourages others. That when somebody is feeling down, they know they can come to you because you're going to build them up and you're going to encourage them and you're going to pray for them. Produce good fruit. Ask yourself this question: God, what do you want to do through me? Far too often we ask ourselves, God, or we ask ourselves, all right, what do I want? And then we pray, God, this is what I want. Or God, some people say, what do you want me to do? If we're really spiritual, we say, God, what do you want me to do? But we need to be saying, God, what do you want to do through me? We need to turn our minds and our hearts to God's plan and allow God to use us for His purpose. Esther allowed God to use her for His purpose, and it reshaped society at the time and changed the world. Allow God to ask yourself, ask God this question, God, what do you want to do through my life? And if you will listen and then do it, you can reshape the world around you. You can change someone's life forever. You've got to remember these four things as you go through your life, as you grow and mature. Remember that God has a purpose for your life. I don't care what anybody else says. I don't care what anybody else in your family, anybody else in your school. You are not a mistake. You are not worthless. You have been made and designed for a great purpose by an amazing God that loved you so much He sent His Son to die for you. If you didn't have a purpose, what was the reason for the cross? You have a purpose. Get out of your comfort zone. Don't be scared. Allow God to use you. Allow God to take what you have and use you for something great. Get uncomfortable. It's really not that bad, looking back. Being uncomfortable is probably one of the best things I've ever done in my life. Our strength doesn't come from ourselves. It comes from God. So get on your knees and pray. Ask God for strength to get out of your comfort zone and to help you fulfill your purpose. Ask God for strength to go talk to that person, to go do that thing, to take a stand for what's right. This world is so full of people that is shoving all kinds of things down our throats, trying to tell us we have to live a certain way, do a certain thing, all of these sinful things that just bring us more into confusion and darkness than our world has been. It seems like every day something new is coming up that is confusing and crazy that's just pulling us away. Ask God for strength to stand on His word and stand on what is right. And then pray and ask God to use you to make an impact. You can make an impact. Think about this. If you share Jesus with one person, or if you build one person up, encourage one person, and then that one person goes and encourages one person, you've now encouraged two people. Right? And so on, and so on, and so on. You can make an impact if you're willing. Just get out of your comfort zone and trust God. I encourage you to read the story of Esther and just the courage that Esther and Mordecai had in this story, and how while God's name may not be mentioned, you see God working throughout this story. When Esther had prayed and asked people to pray for her, God strengthened her. Because you can see that she really didn't want to go talk to the king. She really didn't want to go talk to the king. But she asked for prayers, and that prayer gave her the strength to take that step. And God blessed her because of it. And He'll do the same for you.